Welcome to this video for EDIT 5055. In this video, we're going to look at Introduction to Curriculum Design. And in part 2 and 3, we have an overview of ISTE standards, and then we'll talk about how to write learning outcomes and do some learning outcome writing practice. So starting with part 1, Introduction to Curriculum Design. Remember our design scaffolding. Our design process, or at least parts of what we're going to be doing, fall under understand, explore, create, evaluate. But we're also adding on to this looking at curriculum design in ISTE standards, because that's going to be part of our signature assignment and a part of what many of you will do if you're helping teachers use technologies in schools. So it starts with curriculum design. So remember, we talked about that when we design, everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. So in order to do that, we have to figure out what the preferred situation is. And there's a lot of different nuances to that, but we're going to take a curriculum design approach to that this week, of identifying what's our preferred state. What are we trying to get students and teachers and everyone to learn? Okay. Now, one thing I want to note here is that curriculum design is primarily about formal learning and education. So it comes from a perspective that usually is focused on instruction, that a teacher is going to be instructing a student on something. But as we've gotten into the 21st century, we have new technologies, we've found that a lot of learning happens outside of the formal classroom environments. And even in classroom environments, we can support learning in ways other than having some direct instruction. So curriculum design is more from this rational school of thought, where we're going to try to optimize solutions following a specific approach. It comes from an assumption that what we're doing is instructing someone. Remember, we also talked about action-centric approaches that are more about trying to have creativity to find ideas with framing and reframing. If we're going to reframe learning, we might focus less on instruction and more just learning in general, which could be with or without a teacher. And so as we work on our project for this class, I want you to know that you're free to focus on non-instructional solutions that don't require a direct instructor. But curriculum design primarily comes from a tradition that is based on that direct instruction. It's changing a little bit, but that's the basic tradition it's coming from. So usually in curriculum design, we organize instructional environments. We're also trying to increase efficiency of instruction by organizing it, sequencing it in a way to increase efficiency, and to be able to measure the results. We want to know what we've achieved when we have done these instructional settings. So when we talk about activities of curriculum design, ultimately it's about trying to align what our outcomes want to be, what standards we're trying to meet, the content, and our assessments. So these are from Design for Learning, the Design for Learning chapter, when they talked about activities of curriculum design. We want to understand learners' context environment, which is also a big part of instructional design. We write learning outcomes, usually that aligns with some sort of standards. And standards are helpful because they give us a starting point. And we're going to be talking later in this video about the ISTE standards as a starting point for our class. Part of outcomes is we have to know how we're going to assess those outcomes so we know whether or not we were successful. And then a lot of time we'll break the outcomes into different levels, courses, grade levels, units, lessons, figure out the sequence of them. And then we can pull in some content that can actually support our actual instructional process. And ultimately, then we can design our instructional activities, which is more what instructional design is about. So this is from Design for Learning chapter on curriculum design by Dodd. They have this chart that says, look, curriculum design is kind of like a big picture view where we're trying to look over all of the pieces of what a learning situation might be. Instructional design is more focused on producing the actual materials of instruction. Now, the process I just showed you is kind of like a backwards design process, where we're actually starting from learning outcomes and then developing a strategy and then delivering. Traditionally, a lot of people went this other way. They started with core topics on something, then they said, okay, here's the curriculum around the topics, and then evaluation. But I encourage you to really try hard to focus on this backwards design approach. We're always starting with, okay, what do I want students to get out of this? What do I want people to learn from this? And then build out from there. Quick example based on this class. This is ISTE Standards for Education Leaders. So ISTE is an organization that is about technology and in education, and they've developed some nice standards for what educators and students and education leaders need to know and be able to do concerning technology. And I'm going to talk about this more in the first video. But they have these standards that are specifically for education leaders. And so we use this in this program you're in, the EdTech Leadership Program, to help us have some curriculum and some standards that we're trying to meet. And so you'll see here is, it's hard to see because it's small, but what I have here is across the top here, I have different standards. So this is actually the CAPE standards, which are like a certification type standards. These ones right here, all the green one, the blue ones are major areas of ISTE standards, and the green ones are sub areas of ISTE standards. And so what we're in the process of doing for this program is each of these is a different course in the program. And there's the course description that's online, and then there's the materials we use. And we go through and we try to make sure that we are hitting each of these standards across all the courses of the program. So there might be some courses that we emphasize some areas more than others, but this helps us make sure that we're meeting the standards that the professional organizations have decided are important for educational leaders and instructional designers. Actually over here, this is actually more of, and it's cut off here, this is more of, this is AACT standards, which are more the instructional design standards, which some of you are more interested in, I think, than the educational technology. So if I go into detail, this is this class, EDIT 5055. I have kind of my own notes and topics. This is the course description that's actually in the course catalog. And this is like our signature assignment, because I have to think, okay, what do I want you to be able to do by the end of this course? And how can I evaluate that? And the signature assignment gives me a way to do that. And then I can go through and see what standards we're going to be addressing through the signature assignment and the other content. And on the syllabus, we have course objectives and outcomes. And again, we have CAPE, we have ISTE, Educational Leader, and we have AACT 2013. And so we want to make sure that these outcomes, these objectives, align across. We try to line it up with an empirical base, what research some people have done. And then when I sit down with the class, I try to get into even more detail. Where this is our class, I break it down into weeks. I think of what's the content I need to follow. What content do I need in order to meet the standards that I'm aiming for? And I figure out reading and assignments all to meet those standards. And it all goes back to that big program idea of what are the things, what are the outcomes we need? What are our goals? What's our preferred state? And then breaking it into pieces. So that's curriculum design. Stay tuned, because next I'm going to talk more about ISTE standards.